It's kind of hard to imagine, but in the 19th century, two of Europe's most influential nations, Italy and Germany, they didn't even exist. Where we now see these unified countries, there was just this chaotic patchwork of smaller states. So let's dive into the incredible story of how these two nations were forged, following two very different blueprints to reach one single goal: unity.
Seriously, just stop and think about that for a second. Imagine your home, your country, split into 39 different pieces, each one with its own ruler, its own laws, its own borders. Well, that wasn't some thought experiment. For the German people, that was their reality after the Napoleonic Wars. And the Italians, they were looking at a map that was just as fragmented.
And you can see it right here on these maps. On the left, you've got the Italian peninsula, and on the right, the German Confederation. It's just a jumble of kingdoms, duchies, and city-states. And notice who's looming over both? The Austrian Empire, a foreign power pulling a lot of the strings, which, as you can imagine, did not sit well with a lot of people.
But all this division, it actually lit a fire. A new and really powerful idea started to sweep across Europe. The idea was simple. People who share a language, a culture, a history, they belong together in one single nation. That idea was nationalism. And believe me, it was about to redraw the map of Europe for good.
So what did the old powers that be think about all this? Well, this quote says it all. The powerful Austrian diplomat Clemens von Metternich, one of the main architects of post-Napoleonic Europe, basically said Italy was nothing more than a simple geographical expression. To him, an Italian nation was a complete joke. He could not have been more wrong.
Over in Italy, this nationalist dream got its own name, the Risorgimento, which means resurgence. And it was exactly that, a cultural and political awakening. You had writers, musicians, secret societies, all working to create this sense of a shared Italian identity. And with it, a burning desire to kick out foreign rulers and finally unite the peninsula.
So how exactly do you turn a dream into a nation? Well, you need architects. You need people with big ideas, people who can make shrewd political moves, and people who aren't afraid to fight. Let's meet the key players who took these dreams of unity and hammered them into reality.
And right away, you can see how different their approaches were. The Italian effort? It was basically a team project. You had Mazzini, the passionate idealist. They called him the soul. You had Count Cavour, the brilliant prime minister, the brain. And you had Giuseppe Garibaldi, the daring general, the sword. Germany's unification, on the other hand, well, that was pretty much a one-man show, run by Otto von Bismarck.
Bismarck's philosophy is captured perfectly right here. Unity wasn't going to come from talking. It was going to be forged with blood and iron. This was his famous Realpolitik, a super practical, unsentimental approach to politics that was all about power. He had no time for debates. For Bismarck, the only things that mattered were a strong army and a strong economy.
And then you have Garibaldi in Italy. What a total contrast. This isn't cold, hard strategy. This is a passionate, romantic appeal straight to the people. It's a call to the heart, fueling a popular revolution. So you see, two unifications, two completely different playbooks.
Okay, so let's see how this all played out. We'll start with Bismarck's methodical path of iron. He didn't just get lucky. No, he engineered German unity through a series of brilliant, calculated wars. Each one was a deliberate step on the path to a single goal.
But before the wars, before the blood, came the economics. Way back in 1834, Prussia set up something called the Zollverein, which was basically a customs union. This was an absolutely genius move. It got all the German states used to working together with Prussia in the lead. And, just as importantly, it kept their main rival, Austria, out of the club.
All right, then came the wars. Step 1. In 1864, Bismarck joins forces with Austria to beat Denmark. Step 2. Just 2 years later, he turns on his former ally, Austria, crushing them in a shockingly fast war and making Prussia the undisputed leader of the Germans. And the final step? He cleverly provoked a war with France in 1870. Facing a common enemy, the last of the independent southern German states rallied to Prussia's side. Game, set, match. Now, the Italian story, it was less like a game of diplomatic chess and much more like a fiery, revolutionary adventure. This was a movement that was really driven from the bottom up by passionate patriots like Garibaldi.
And this brings us to the legendary Expedition of the Thousand. In 1860, Garibaldi and his volunteer army, just 1,000 guys known as the Red Shirts, sailed to Sicily. What happened next is the stuff of legends. They landed, teamed up with local rebels, and somehow defeated the professional army of the kingdom there. They took the island, crossed to the mainland, and marched north, their army grown bigger and bigger until they had conquered all of southern Italy. It was unbelievable.
This all led to a huge critical moment. See, Garibaldi was a Republican. He wanted a unified Italian republic, but the man leading the unification of the North was a king, Victor Emmanuel II. So what does Garibaldi do? In an incredible act of patriotism, he chooses the nation over his own politics. He hands over all of southern Italy to the king, uniting the country.
So there you have it. After decades of struggle, of plotting, and of fighting, two very different paths somehow led to the same destination. A new map of Europe was being drawn, and two major new players were stepping onto the world stage.
And in 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, of all places, Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed Kaiser, or Emperor, of the new German Empire. A military and industrial powerhouse had just been born right in the heart of the continent.
This chart really sums up the contrast perfectly. You have Italy emerging as a liberal monarchy created through a messy mix of top-down diplomacy and bottom-up revolution. And then you have Germany, an authoritarian monarchy, a much more conservative and militaristic state built almost single-handedly by Bismarck's blood and iron strategy.
And that leaves us with one last, massive question. Because the unifications weren't really an end to the story. They were a beginning. The sudden arrival of these two powerful, proud, and ambitious new nations completely shattered the old European order. It created new rivalries and new tensions that would ultimately, tragically, explode into the world-shaking conflicts of the 20th century.